Welcome to The Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist oppression and investigate alternative ways of living, for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. It's your local community radio station that you're tuned into, and my name's Andy, and I'll be hanging out with you for the next hour, broadcasting on Jagera and Turrbal country. And today on the show, we are going to be talking about weapons manufacturers and recent campaigns to try to disrupt the business of these weapons manufacturers and the flow of weapons going to the world's current most high-profile and most one-sided conflict, the Israel's bombardment of Gaza, which is using a lot of weapons, and not all of them are made there in Israel, although Israel is, of course, as a country, a huge weapons exporter. Many of the components and weapons there come from this place, Australia, and in fact Brisbane, and people across the country and across our city have been trying to research where some of these weapons are coming from and how they can intervene in it. And so we've seen a few different campaigns that we will hear about today on the show. One of them is what's called Shut Down Ferra here in Brisbane, where there have been a couple of protests going to Ferra Engineering at Tingalpa. Ferra make the components for F-35 bomber planes, which are currently reducing Gaza to rubble. They make these little adapters which open and close the bit that drops the weapon out of the plane. They're made there. And Ferra is proud to say they're the only company that makes these adapters, and their factory in Tingalpa has been the subject of these pickets to try to disrupt that, try to block entry at the beginning of the workday and things like that. We'll hear more about that in a second from Jake from Shut Down Ferra. Also, Boeing, one of the world's biggest weapons manufacturers, who have sold all kinds of weapons to Israel and have a big presence here in Brisbane. And so there's been protests there recently, and we saw last week a pretty hectic police response to a pretty normal protest there at Boeing. And so we'll hear about that from Margie Pastorius, and then we'll be travelling down to Victoria, where there's been a number of protests, one of which is happening right now. Protesters are out the front of HTA, which is Heat Treatment Australia. They were there yesterday as well, shutting the place down, because it turns out HTA also are involved in the manufacturing of F-35 Joint Strike Fighter planes. They do the heat testing of all the components in that plane, and it seems like a small thing, but they would not be able to drop bombs if it wasn't for people doing these kind of small things. But also we're going to hear about the community picket at the Port of Melbourne trying to stop the Zim ship from being loaded and unloaded. That happened last week, and there's been a consistent sort of targeting of that company, Zim, which is a big Israel freight company, which has also been vocal about their support for the IDF's activities. So stick around, we'll hear about ordinary people who are seemingly a long way away from this conflict and forced to just watch it helplessly, but actually have found a way to intervene and try to put their bodies in the way of the slaughter happening currently in Gaza. And it's quite inspiring actually to hear from ordinary people looking for ways in their own city that they can do something and not just be a bystander while this tragedy unfolds. So on the phone here, I have Jake from Shutdown Ferrer. Hello, Jake.
How you doing, Andy? Thanks for having me.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for coming on air. And today we're going to be talking about all kinds of campaigns against weapons manufacturing companies. But let's start off with Ferrer. Can you tell us a bit about who are Ferrer and what do they do?
Ferrer is a manufacturing firm based here in Brisbane, in Tingalpa, actually. They have a focus on aerospace and defence. A couple of their notable partnerships, one with Boeing, which is agreement to design a unmanned aerial drone, specifically for the Australian Air Force. But the one that we're more interested in is their partnership with Lockheed Martin and the manufacturer of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. Ferrer, they produce a few components for that jet, but the one that we're most interested in is the wing kit, which basically the mechanism that holds the munitions, like various kinds of rockets and bombs, to the wings of the jet fighter, and they house the mechanism that actuates the bomb to drop onto the target. So I think the most important thing about these components is that the only place in the whole world that they're manufactured is here in Brisbane. So our goal with Shutdown Ferrer is to take advantage of that choke point. If we are able to disrupt the production of these components, then we're basically rendering these machines useless in their operation as an instrument of death.
Yeah, so has there been documented use of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighters and these components in the destruction of Gaza?
Yeah, they've been used numerous times in the current aggression, and I believe they've been used before in other bombing campaigns in the region also.
All right, so can you tell us a bit about what the Shutdown Ferrer campaign has looked like so far?
Well, we've had a couple of actions against Ferrer so far. The first one was on January 8th, where a number of local activists actually stormed the gate of the complex and managed to occupy the manufacturing floor for a time. They also managed to actually physically shut down many of the machines in the factory that are used to manufacture the components. Since then, we have had two more pickets on the outside blockading the front gate in an attempt to limit the amount of deliveries that they are able to receive. And yeah, that's been our action so far in the campaign.
And is there more planned? They've been sort of regular over the last few weeks. Is there looking like being regular pickets?
Yeah, we're going to try to keep it a regular thing, once a week if possible. We haven't made any solid plans for the next one, but we're definitely going to try to keep that momentum going.
Now, I'll be talking later in the show with Margie Pistorius, who was arrested last week after a pretty standard protest at Boeing, and there has been some police heavy presence, I guess, at some of those FARA pickets. I guess, what do you think that said? What's that look like, and what do you think it says for people trying to do this kind of work to stop these bombs falling?
As you said, the police response has been pretty heavy-handed, considering the type of offences that are alleged to have been made on the 24th of January, I believe it was. There was numerous raids around Brisbane on the homes of a few of the activists that have been alleged to have been involved in the first action at FARA. The counter-terrorism unit has been involved, and at the pickets themselves, they've had quite a heavy police presence, including plainclothes detectives, and it all seems to be an effort to discourage further actions or intimidate activists out of taking a stand against FARA, but we're trying to stand strong against these tactics of intimidation and keep the pressure on FARA.
Yeah, so if people want to find out more about what's going on or potentially get involved, how can they do that?
We have a Instagram, Shutdown FARA, where we try to keep everyone up to date on what's happening. There's also a Facebook page where we post any upcoming events or actions, and also at the rallies on the weekend, in conjunction with Justice for Palestine, we make announcements on any intended actions or events happening in relation to FARA.
All right. Thanks very much, Jake, for having a chat with us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
On 4ZZZ, that is Jake from Shutdown FARA, one of many campaigns around the country aimed at companies who are somehow in the supply chain of weapons currently being used to terrorise and destroy the population of Gaza. Let's hear about another campaign from Margie Pistorius from Wage Peace about what they've been doing at Boeing.
Hi Andy, I'm Margie Pistorius and I do some anti-militarism work with Wage Peace.
And we're going to talk about one of those recent campaigns that Wage Peace has been doing against Boeing. And it's been going for a long time, but it's intensified, I guess, recently. But to start off with, you want to tell us about why Wage Peace has been running a campaign against Boeing.
Well, Boeing is a US corporation. It's number 3 in the world as a weapons corporation, behind Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, which both also have facilities in Brisbane. But Boeing has a pattern of embedding itself in the social structures of the society. It did that in Chicago when it was based there for a long time, and it's now doing it in Brisbane, which it has a special relationship with. It has a special relationship with the Queensland government, and it appears to have been invited to set up shop here in a number of ways by the Queensland government, especially around its drone manufacturing project, which is called now the Ghost Bat. They're always stealing our names of our beautiful animals, like the Wedge-tail Project and the Ghost Bat Project. And the Ghost Bat is actually it's a weaponised drone that accompanies a jet fighter. So it's able to have different weapons attached to it, whatever the flavour of the day is, and then it flies in relationship with a jet fighter that is also dropping bombs.
So there's a number of Boeing facilities in Brisbane. as well as their close links to the University of Queensland. And part of the campaign's been just highlighting the fact that these places are here and that they're building things like these unmanned drones.
Yes, because Boeing is a weapons company and people think of it as a sort of a nice civilian company. And if you go out to its operations at the university, it's got a little mini museum set up which shows all its civilian aircraft and doesn't really mention its military aircraft, but it is there as a defence installation. That's why it's at the university. It's being funded by Defence, it's been organised by Defence, and Boeing is a weapons company, and that's what we're wanting people to remember. But like you said, Andy, it does have other facilities. It's got 2 buildings in town now, and then it's got a little factory out at Alderley that makes surveillance drones, and potentially is also helping with the Ghost Bat project. And then it's got some other facilities inside military bases, like out at Amberley and up at that new airport up at Toowoomba. They seem to be doing some testing up there as well. That's the sort of spaces that we know about. They're also probably involved over at Eagle Farm at the Defence Science Technologies building they've got over there, sort of doing some research into their hypersonics as well.
So this campaign's been going for quite a while, that Wage Peace has been running, but in the last few months since the bombing of Gaza, I guess it's taken on a new aspect in that we're seeing these weapons being used on a civilian population. How has it changed, I guess, since the bombing of Gaza began?
Well, people are very upset about the bombing of Gaza. People are outraged, people are infuriated, people are watching it unroll in front of their face on social media. People are very, very angry about it, and they find it, for some people, it's the first time they've noticed that the government is not on our side and the government of the worlds are not on the people's side. So what we're seeing is a lot of new people turning up, coming out and looking for ways of taking action against weapons companies. Boeing is your major beneficiary at the moment in Israel, with selling arms to Israel. The first thing they did was expedite 1,000 JDAM kits, which were guided missile kits. They also organised the bunker blasters, or whatever they're called, which are the big, heavy bombs that they're using to just obliterate the whole of Gaza, basically. And they also used the Apache helicopters, otherwise known as the attack helicopters, which got used on that very first day, but attack helicopters always get used to cover a ground invasion. So there's all sorts of ways that Boeing is implicated in making piles of money out of what's going on in Israel.
So since then, you've been doing a few office occupations at Boeing. Do you want to tell us what they've been like?
Yeah, so we've had it's a sort of a naturally occurring escalation that we hadn't entirely planned, but people are keen to do things, right? So we attended Boeing on the 2nd of January with Mums for Palestine, which was a new group, and they had actually decided they wanted to do that, so we just accompanied them. Our team, some people that we knew, accompanied them, and we'd been there before, so we were able to say this is what it's like, but it was their initiative, and we supported them to tell the stories of mothers and children and fathers and grandparents being killed in Gaza. And then there's been also interest in other weapons corporations. In Brisbane, there's a Lockheed Martin jet fighter that's being used for the bombing, and it has a part that's being made in Brisbane, so people also went to an occupation over there with that factory. That wasn't Boeing, but you can see the bombs that it's dropping on these F-35s are Boeing bombs, so they're intimately connected. And then we went back to Boeing because there was a week where people really just wanted to do something. You know, their spirit has taken people, and they want to really explore this idea of what's going on. And we go to the place, we went back to Boeing, and we went into the office and occupied and read poetry. A number of young people read poetry that they had, the Palestinian poetry, amplifying the voices of the Palestinians who are calling out for this genocide to stop. And some people also pasted pictures of the babies that we'd had at that first, that the mums for Palestine were highlighting the deaths of the babies in the genocide. And somewhere in that we had the actual sort of proclamation by the IJC that these were genocidal activities, and that sort of justifies us in some way, that the work that we're doing is important, and we're just ordinary people taking action to say Boeing is a weapons company, Boeing is part of this genocide, Boeing is benefiting the genocide. You never hear Boeing say stop the genocide, but Boeing is like, oh no, more genocide please, more.
And I'm interested just in talking about what is the rationale for these kind of disruptive actions. I guess, there's lots of different ways that people are protesting about Gaza or, injustice. But this idea of going to these places and inserting yourself and disrupting it, I mean, what's the importance of that? That's a thing that Wage Peace has been very big on.
Yeah, so we do what we call is location-based storytelling. I think that a lot of people's learning about what's going on in the world has become very disembodied. People have learnt about what's happening via social media streams, by watching other people do things, by learning about it, reading about it. But this is reading and sort of this non-embodied, understanding is not really changing the world. You have to change the world by actually changing the place that you put your body. Every time you move your body to a new place, you've changed the world in some way. So our thought is that people learn much more quickly that way. They understand what's going on much more quickly. The understanding of reality becomes just much stronger and more powerful, and people never go back to a different way of seeing the world once they've done these embodied actions. So it's important. It's also important for Boeing to understand, what they're doing. But we also try to get the location-based storytelling out on the live feed, because that's another way people can expose themselves to what's going on and expose themselves to this idea that people can put themselves in different positions in the world to really jam what's happening. And so we've seen actions around the world where people have gone to factories and just turned the machines off to stop the parts being built. Or we've seen people stop railway lines in Canada. There's a bunch of people who've gone and stood on the railway lines and said you must not transport these parts. Or in London, right, just in the last couple of days, you see people disturbing a big factory at Shenstone and Albert factory, or a conference, like a dinner schmooze as part of a weapons conference that's on in London this week. And so when people go out and actually put themselves in a location and start to peel back that factory or that situation, we actually get real life moment-to-moment change. We're not waiting for somebody else to do the change in the future. We are actually changing the way the reality is structured right now. And so people need to start on that journey somewhere, and we offer people an opportunity to start on that journey so that they can then figure out what they're going to do next and how they're going to change the world.
Well, after the last occupation, which you said people read poetry and things like that, and it went well. There was a bit of a dramatic response from the police. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, well, my household of 5 people, somebody whose father died last week, we were woken up at 6:30 by the counter-terrorism squad. So the police, somebody put the counter-terrorism squad in charge of this operation. They got a warrant from Magistrate Cameron McKenzie, who believed the stories of the government that we were all very, very dangerous, and that our poetry was violent, and our pasting was terrible, terrible property damage. So he allowed a group of 8 police in 5 different locations to disrupt households of people who were sleeping at 6:30 in the morning with an early morning raid. They arrested me, they arrested 4 other people, they put us in the watch house, they tried to put very severe bail conditions on us. They searched our houses. They took photos of our black clothes. They thought, there were people wearing black clothes at one of these actions, so we just want to match your black shirt with the black shirt that's on these people. Yeah, it was terrifying, really. It was disturbing and terrifying. They didn't do it with guns drawn, thankfully, and they were quite calm. But just having 4 armed officers in your bedroom, in your flat, with your friends being woken up at 6:30 in the morning for something that they could have rung me to come down to the station to talk to them about, which I would have done, was just incredibly overkill, as they say. It's been very disruptive. They stole our phones, and our phones, of course, don't just have our organising, relationships. They also have our bank accounts, the access to all our social media and all the platforms we use. They took those phones. They demanded the PIN number for entry. And 2 of us refused to give that PIN number, which meant that we've been charged with another charge that has 10 years in prison, which is quite scary, really, because it's a new charge. Again, it's an indictable offence. In order to get the warrant, they had to say that we were very dangerous and violent, so they charged me with assault from where we pushed open the door at Boeing. They charged me with being in an unlawful assembly from when we pushed open the door at Boeing, and this pushing open the door was seen to be a very, very violent act. Yeah, so it's very disturbing that the state is using the counter-terrorism squad for this, not just the plainclothes police. The plainclothes police had encountered us at Boeing at 6 times in the past and never arrested us. For that, we've been hammered. It's quite tricky to come back from.
Yes, well, what will be the response? I guess this has been designed to sort of scare you off doing these kind of actions. What's the planned response?
Well, we're hoping to escalate. Boeing is a great target. The university is a great... the university really should not be associated with weapons companies. The weapons companies have inserted themselves into universities and are pretty much taking them over. Very similar to how they've inserted themselves into government and taking over the governments. So it's not like we're not watching it happen in this sort of state capture, and this is part of the state capture, is to take over an institution and repurpose that institution for the company's purposes. In this case, it's for weapons industry purposes. What we're calling on people is people need to get organised and active, and we're calling people out. It's time to come out. It's time to come out on Sundays to the JFP actions. It's time to come out and join these the small organising groups that are organising against the weapons companies, make each of those groups larger so we can do more. It's time to escalate in ways that are still completely non-harmful, but in ways that we're able to communicate broadly to the society about what's going on. People are watching and are disturbed by the Gazan genocide. It is an incredibly disgusting thing that is going on right now, and it's not that it hasn't already happened in this place, and I'm here on Yagara country where that same sort of genocide occurred, and those of us who have faced up to that genocide can see this genocide rolling out in real time. But we need to act against it, because we've got the climate crisis, which is also a type of genocide, as people will die in vast numbers under the climate crisis. People are going to have to be able to keep our elected officers active and accountable to building broadly just societies rather than these fascist societies that we're heading towards.
All right, thanks very much, Margie.
No worries, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Here on the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ, we've been talking with activists who are trying to draw the links back to places in the suburbs of Brisbane where these bombs are being manufactured, or components for them are. And, just people going to work, obviously do your 9 to 5 or 7 to 3, and everybody's got to make a living. But yeah, is this what kind of work that we want to be doing? Is this what the real work is for this society? And we need to draw these links, because if we can break up the links in the chain, it makes it a lot harder for the kind of industrial slaughter that we've seen happening over there. We were talking with Margie Pistorius before that about the campaign against Boeing, and about the police response last week, which was certainly over the top, and it is incredible, in this face of such violence that it's so easy to see right now if you go on your computer and look at it, that still the police in this society, all they have to offer is, anti-terror squads to try to arrest people for doing these kind of sit-in occupation protests. In another part of Australia, in Victoria, people have also been trying to track down where these weapons are coming from, and there's been a number of actions going on, including one that's happening right now at HTA in Campbellfield in Melbourne. I spoke to Sam Castro about these actions down there. Let's have a listen to Sam.
Hi, Andy. My name is Sam Castro. I'm part of WACA, Whistleblowers, Activists and Communities Alliance, and I'm based out of Naarm.
And WACA has been one of a number of groups and concerned people who in the past few months and the past couple of weeks particularly have been protesting against Zim, an Israeli freight company. Can you tell us a bit about why that campaign's happened?
Yeah, sure. I mean, people who have been around long enough would know WACA has been organising and taking direct action in support of the freedom and liberation of Palestine going back 10 years, longer actually now, 13 years. But this particular genocidal attack really made us want to go and search out under sort of BDS, I guess, guidelines, organisations, corporations, companies that are part of the supply chain and that are profiteering off the genocidal attack on Palestine. And Zim Shipping is the sort of flagship Israeli container shipping company. And the CEO, after October 7, came out and said they would give basically all of their profits and all of their effort to support Israel's attacks on Gaza and the Palestinian people. And so it seemed to us, coming out of 2018 attacks, there was a global movement around targeting arms manufacturing and associated corporations that feed the supply chain around the world. So that included us here going after arms manufacturers like Elbit System at the time, and then looking at how we impact those components, weaponry and supplies going to Israel. And now, of course, that this time around has also been taken up globally and emerged with the Free Palestine Melbourne Unionists for Palestine holding dock rallies and blockades to really apply the pressure to Zims, who had so openly declared it's prepared to fund and give its profits to the IDF and to the genocidal attacks that are currently happening through Israel.
Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about that campaign against Zim and the community picket and things like that have just been happening. But you just bring up an important point, which is that actually there's other companies as well that are involved in the attacks on Gaza that have been targeted in Melbourne, including Elbit, as you mentioned, and more recently HTA. Do you want to talk a bit about, I guess, broadly the different companies that have been targeted?
Yeah, so Wage Peace, Disrupt Wars and WACA have a long history of our affinity groups and collectives working together to target arms manufacturing in Naarm and also, interstate in various other locations when they pop up. I think the first time we went after Elbit was in 2014. It's also Thales. We were involved for many years in the pre-pandemic times in the initial phase of the Lockout Lockheed campaign to get Lockheed Martin off Melbourne Uni campus. And also, of course, BAE Systems. And now, of course, as we've moved into this, intensely, there's no other word for it other than attempt to genocide the Palestinian people, we decided that we needed to detail down into all parts of the supply chain that is creating these weapons of death, because that's all they are, is they're designed to kill. So part of that is looking at the supply chain within Australia. One of the ways that the Australian government and the state government have been doing business for many years is to, privatise and outsource to private companies. This enables them to keep things in commercial confidence, but also means it's harder for us as a community to hold these corporations and businesses accountable. And HTA is one of those companies that is involved in sort of heat test stress test parts of the F-35. So it seems like an incredibly small and obscure part of the process, but it's an essential part that enables these, birds of prey to basically make sure that they're functioning well to be able to kill more people. There are other companies like Rosebank. They are the only manufacturer, I think, in the world of the actual flap door that opens on the F-35 to drop the bombs. So there are many small component parts of the weapons and death machinery military industrial complex, and we think it's really important that if we're talking about stopping a genocide, then we really do need to take seriously not participating in producing components that participate in that.
There's something about finding the things locally as well, like a thing that seems so far away, to find the points where, our local communities do actually connect up with this.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, for example, Albert is tucked away in Port Melbourne and various other debranded locations. And HTA, we found, are living very comfortably in their little industrial zoned area in Campbellfield, which are very nondescript kind of location, hiding in plain sight. And we thought yesterday we had been planning a series of actions around these type of corporations. And so yesterday we went into HTA to say to them that, we are not going to accept, companies like this sitting in our suburbs producing parts of or stress testing parts of machinery to go and kill children in Gaza or anywhere else for that matter.
Yeah, well, let's go back to Zim. So last week there was a 4-day picket of the Port of Melbourne to try to stop Zim ships from being loaded. Can you tell us a bit about what it was like, this action?
Yeah, so Unionists for Palestine called a rally and I guess a picket that went on longer than people may have originally thought it would go. But it was a combined effort of many groups supporting the Palestinian community, Free Palestine Melbourne, Sit-in Intifada, Block the Dock, Unionists for Palestine, Black People's Union, WACA, and various other amazing affinity groups of organisers and activists from around the local area coming together. And, what started off as a one-day thing turned into 4 days. I think on the second day, on the Saturday, the police attempted to break up the picket maybe 3 or 4 times. We were organising in shifts around the clock, 24/7 to be there. We had all of the gates locked down. The MUA at first on the Saturday, refused to get on the police bus that the police wanted to use to break the picket. At that point, those workers were told they would be stood down without pay. The community then set up a crowdfunder to raise money to cover the cost of the workers who weren't paid, so that they could continue to refuse to break the picket and stand with the community on stopping Zim shipping from contributing to the genocidal supply chain. I think it was a really amazing feat by a whole heap of people to keep it going as long as it did. I think that ultimately the police used extreme force and violence on the Monday to break up the picket. They had maybe, 200 police, maybe even more. They had horses, they had all the bells and whistles and pepper spray and all the things. And they did manage to break the picket and move it out of the main gate. But they didn't manage to get the workers across because Waka and some of our mates had already gone to the secret location they were using to bring the workers in and stop the workers from boarding, and they were stood down for that day on the Monday. It was extremely effective in proving our point that community does have the power to shut things down, to put an economic cost on corporations that support genocide. And in my opinion, it's something that should be done over and over again all around the world. And the reason that we all came together to do this is that the Palestine Trade Unionist movement called on the rest of the world to disrupt the flow of capital, to block the docks, to block the boats. And we thought it was a really important call to answer. And I think we learnt a lot. I'm very proud of how everyone worked together and how staunch people were in the face of just extraordinarily bad behaviour by police over and over again over those 3 days. And, you got to question what kind of world you're living in when the police will use violence to break up people that are trying to stop genocide.
All right. Thanks very much, Sam.
No worries.
We were just talking to Sam Castro about what's been happening down in Melbourne, Naarm, where they have been targeting companies that are involved in the slaughter of Gaza. Most recently, they're at HTA right now, and also last week, as we heard, at the Port of Melbourne, stopping Zim, and also they've been targeting Elbit Systems. As we heard earlier in the show, here in Brisbane, people have been going after Boeing and Ferra. And look, there's lots of opportunities to get involved. Of course, everybody's busy in our lives, but there's just such horrendous scenes going on across the world, and all of us are somehow complicit. We live in this system, this interlocked world, and we have a chance to try to work out how we want our lives to be something that is working for peace, rather than, these places in our suburbs, in our city, that are profiting off the war and off the total destruction of Gaza, and these people who have been born in this city and have never been allowed to leave, even if they wanted to, in this open-air prison of Gaza, and now are being killed just for existing, basically, when Israel doesn't want them to. And so I will keep covering it on the Paradigm Shift as well, and of course, Shutdown Ferry, you can check out Wage Peace here in Brisbane, and also Justice for Palestine Magunjan, as it's now called, who are holding rallies most Sundays. That's about all we have time for on the Paradigm Shift. I'll see you next week.